ARN.
There's something. There's something not on that list that I thought of, which you brought up the other day at Dad's house, which was ignoring the collective to heal faster.
Ignoring the collective field of belief. Yeah.
And you're like, I won't explain it because it's too complicated. So I thought, what a great ARN topic.
Of course. Of course that's how it goes. Where to begin with this?
Well, I guess, the basic principle, the basic beginning or whatever is like, you get hurt, you need to heal, and you're saying, you can, people believe generally you have to heal, you have to do things or take things or do something to heal, like a wound, physical wound.
Yeah. But like even before that, you gotta explain why that's a factor at all. So obviously most stuff in the world is kind of let me say it, just goofy. What's a better way of approaching this? Because this is going to be way too out there to follow without laying some groundwork. Okay. If there was like a group of, say, thousands of people in a hall, and I was like, how many of you did not get involved in the grade 1 through 12 education institution thingy-mabobber? There'd be like maybe a handful of people who didn't go through grade 1 through grade 12 of the school system as we know it. Then I would be like, of all of you, how many of you have ever said that this was the best way you could have spent those 12 pivotal years of your life? Maybe a handful. And then with all of the rest of them, have you ever heard anybody else say that those 12 years that they spent from grade 1 to 12 in the education institution thingy, that to them it was the best, like the most optimal way they could have spent those 12 pivotal years of their life? Maybe another handful. So we've got a few handfuls, and then thousands and thousands of other people that if you ask them, like, even not even just being, were these 12 years the optimal thing to do and like the best way in any way, from like learning a lot to the most fun to the most creative, anything, like just tell me something positive about it. Maybe a few more handfuls that would be actually be able, and most of those positive things would be, it was a good way of meeting a lot of people. It's like you could have done that infinite other ways. So like most of the benefits from it would have been things you would benefit from more in other ways. So not even just asking, is it the optimal way you could have spent those years, but were they even like baseline decent? Was it okay and like passable? And like the handful, just a few handfuls of thousands. So then it's like, how many of you, if you have kids, will have kids, or are having kids, are going to send your kids into the same system? And then almost all of them would say it. And like, what is that? Like the something I also mentioned it as is like one of my main questions to people is like, what are you doing? Like, to almost everything that people do is, it's like there's a difference between stupidity and ignorance, and usually there's many layers of stupidity before you find the subtle ignorance that is kind of like holding it all up. Like people are not inherently stupid, they're inherently ignorant, and like everybody, like, so parents grow up and they're like, that was like a waste of useless 12 years, that lots of collateral and personal damage. For us it was bad in almost every regard. They have kids, those kids grow up, I'm the kid growing up, and then after I go through that I ask my parents, so why did you send me through that? was it good for you? Because it was not good for me. And they're like, no, it was not good for us. I'm like, was it good for all of your friends and everybody you know? And that's why you sent me? And they'd be like, no, it wasn't good for any of them. And I'd be like, cool, it wasn't good for me either. And it wasn't good for anybody I know. To send my kids to it for any person who has grown up and your parents did not say it was the best thing ever and you don't think it was the best thing ever, if you send your kids into the educational institutions in the same manner, that's not ignorance anymore. That's stupidity. The ignorance is subtler than that. It's deeper down. Because you know, like you're very well known, like that is very known to you what you are doing. So then you just have to ask the simple question of like, what are you doing? Because if you looked at it at all, you would realize how stupid it is. But there's an ignorance under there of like, but I don't know what else to do. Or because I have to, because I don't see any other choice. Or things like that. Like that's the ignorance part that can crop up things like justifications to establish the stupidity that you would go through. So it's like, if it's like, what are you doing? I'm sending my kids into this thing that doesn't benefit anybody at all, will damage them long-term, short-term, it'll not be fun, it'll like crush their creativity, their ability to learn, all this other stuff. And then have that happen for 12 years straight and not think twice about it. Like, you know what you're doing when you do that for the entire duration that it's going on. And you'll never hear anything good from the kid about it, aside from like, oh, we had a funny thing happen today. The rest of the whole time they're miserable. And you do it out of an ignorance that is like, this is just the norm. This is what people do. Or there's no other real good option or anything like that. And like if you actually think about like, what are you doing? And you get deep enough out of the stupidity that you have about doing this thing, in past all the ways that you're justifying your excuses or the confusion that you have about what you should do or shouldn't do or anything, and you just look at what you're doing. Eventually you will get to that subtle ignorance way down there, below the collective mess of this is the norm, this is what happens, this is like, if school was not an option, if it wasn't there, what would you do? And like from ignorance, you would go, like the dad would just sit down with the kid and be like, hey, what do you want to figure out how to do? And then start listing off things that you could do until the kid is like, hey, that one sounds fun. And then you would both probably collectively, like together, as a new collective, learn how to do that thing, develop a bunch of skills. And in the process, you would learn language because you would have to know how to communicate properly to do the thing. You would learn math. Like you could do this with a 6-year-old, like 4-year-old. And they would learn math because they would have to be able to measure or something. Like they would learn all of the traits that you would ever learn in an educational system, but way faster, way more efficiently, in a way better manner, in a way that they want to, which increases like the rate and skill and retention of everything. And there's so much more bonding there. Like everything, it's just so obvious. You just have to ask the question, like, what are you really doing? And get below that stupidity and that collective barrier, whatever it is. So, like, that's on a grand scale of what the collective is like, and just the sludge of, like, I'm putting it really crudely of just calling it stupidity, but it's like the sludge of people not doing or doing things despite what they know, not because of what they know, but despite what they know. And then you get down to you figure something out, and then you start to do things because of what you know. So it's like getting out of you know a bunch of things and you're just going against it, to, okay, I don't know what's going on, let me learn something, let me come up with something, and then you start doing actions based on what you do know. And that's like the grand layer of it, on a kind of global, just institutional level, almost like global, like around the world, the billions and billions of people, every single person seemingly with like that tiny pocket, that tiny fraction of percentage has not gone through this system. And of those billions of people, for some reason, they keep perpetuating it. And it's not out of ignorance for most of the layers until like the subtlest possible layer. It's all just the collective mush the stupidity part of it. So yeah, that's like one layer of it. So when you get into and that's like really obvious stuff. Like it's really obvious when you just ask around, how was those 12 years of school, or how was etc. But when you go into the deeper stuff, like healing, like actual healing, not like, trauma, we gotta heal through our experience or something, but like this week or last week on Monday, I lost a good chunk of my face, like most of it disappeared, including some of my scalp, etc. And if I was around a bunch of people that were like, this is probably even jumping way too many layers,